Officer Marcus Webb's career in law enforcement ended on November 23, 2023, exactly 17 days after Thanksgiving. The termination letter cited egregious violation of constitutional rights, reckless disregard for procedure, and conduct unbecoming an officer. Virginia settled the subsequent lawsuit for $1.9 million. But the money wasn't the story. The money never is. The story is what happens when unchecked authority collides with unshakable dignity. When a badge becomes a weapon against the very institutions it's meant to protect. When 11 years of complaints, warnings, and reassignments finally accumulate into a single catastrophic moment that no department can ignore and no settlement can erase. This is the story of Judge Marion Foster, Harvard Law. 23 years on the bench, recipient of the Thurgood Marshall Award for Judicial Excellence, handcuffed in her own driveway while her family's Thanksgiving dinner went cold inside. This is the story of how arrogance, assumptions, and 18 minutes of video footage destroyed a career, enriched a victim, and forced a city to finally answer a question it had been avoiding for over a decade. How many chances does one officer get before consequence becomes inevitable? The answer, it turned out, was 47 complaints too many. Marion Foster didn't raise her voice during the arrest, didn't struggle, didn't plead. She stood there with her hands cuffed behind her back, her credentials scattered on the asphalt, and asked one question 17 times. Will you verify my identity? 17 times. The dash cam caught everyone. That restraint, that would cost the city nearly $2 million. Before we continue, where are you watching from? This happened in Virginia, but these stories, these patterns, they're everywhere. If you're here because you believe accountability matters, because you think the system should work for everyone equally, hit that subscribe button. Now let's talk about Thanksgiving 2023. Riverside, Virginia. Population 84,000. A city that prides itself on its historic downtown, its canopy-lined streets, its carefully preserved colonial architecture. The kind of place where median home values hover around $425,000, where the coffee shops have names like The Daily Grind and Common Grounds, where city council meetings open with readings from the Virginia Declaration of Rights. Progressive in rhetoric, proud of its diversity initiatives, home to a substantial federal courthouse that employs over 200 people, the Westmont neighborhood sits on the northern edge of Riverside's most affluent district. Brick colonials, manicured lawns, streets named after trees, elm, maple, birchwood. The kind of neighborhood where holiday decorations go up the weekend before Thanksgiving and stay tasteful wreaths, white lights, maybe a dignified cornucopia on the porch. Where crime statistics read like a public relations brochure and property values climb 3% annually. Judge Marion Foster's home occupied the corner lot at Birchwood and Sterling, a federal-style brick colonial built in 1987, renovated in 2014. 4 bedrooms, wraparound porch, a circular driveway that accommodated 5 vehicles. On November 23, 2023, that driveway held her silver Lexus, her daughter's Honda, her son-in-law's truck, and her sister's SUV. Thanksgiving, family gathering, the scent of roasted turkey drifting through open windows, despite the 40-degree temperature. It was 2:47 p.m. when Judge Foster pulled into her own driveway after a morning at the courthouse. Yes, she'd worked a half day on Thanksgiving, clearing motions so her clerks could take the full weekend. The sun hung low and pale in a cloudless sky. Leaves covered her lawn in rust and gold. Her grandchildren's voices carried from the backyard where they were playing touch football. She parked, gathered her briefcase, and the pie she'd picked up from the bakery on 4th Street, started toward her front door. That's when Officer Marcus Webb pulled up behind her vehicle, blocking her in, lights flashing. 2:49 p.m. Marion Elizabeth Foster. Born 1,961 inches, Richmond, Virginia, to a postal worker father and a high school English teacher mother. Graduated valedictorian from Thomas Jefferson High School in 1979. Full academic scholarship to the University of Virginia. Bachelor's degree in political science, summa cum laude, 1,983. During her undergraduate years, she interned with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and spent a summer working on voter registration drives across rural Virginia. Harvard Law School, class of 1986. Law Review. Graduated in the top 10% of her class. Recruited by 3 major firms. Chose public service instead. Started as a public defender in Richmond, where she spent 7 years representing indigent clients in criminal court. Earned a reputation for thorough preparation and unshakable courtroom composure. Opposing prosecutors learned quickly, if Marion Foster was on the case, bring your best evidence, because she'd find every gap, every inconsistency, every constitutional violation. In 1993, she transitioned to the federal system as an assistant U.S. attorney, spent 8 years prosecuting civil rights violations, public corruption, and federal fraud cases. Conviction rate. She specialized in cases involving police misconduct, ironic, given what was coming, and built a meticulous record of holding officers accountable for excessive force, false arrests, and rights violations. Appointed to the federal bench in 2001 by President George W. Bush, confirmed unanimously. At 40 years old, she became one of the youngest federal judges in the Eastern District of Virginia. Over the next 22 years, she presided over more than 3,700 cases. Civil rights litigation, criminal trials, complex federal jurisdiction disputes. She authored opinions cited in 16 appellate decisions. She was known for running an efficient courtroom, for giving attorneys clear guidance, and for never losing her temper even when she should have. In 2019, the Judicial Council of the Fourth Circuit awarded her the Thurgood Marshall Award for Excellence in Federal Jurisprudence. The citation praised her unwavering commitment to constitutional principles, her scholarly approach to complex legal questions, and her dedication to equal justice under law. She kept the award in her chambers, not her home. She wasn't one for displays. By November 2023, Judge Foster had served on the federal bench for 22 years. She'd mentored 18 law clerks. She'd spoken at 14 law schools. She'd written over 400 published opinions. Her reputation was unimpeachable. Her record was pristine. Her credentials were a matter of public record. On Thanksgiving Day, 2023, she'd spent the morning at the courthouse reviewing emergency motions for a Monday hearing. She left at 1:45 p.m., stopped at Riverside Bakery for a sweet potato pie. She was wearing black slacks, a cream sweater, and a judicial pin on her collar, a small eagle, the symbol of the federal judiciary, barely visible unless you were looking for it. She was 62 years old. She'd been a judge longer than Officer Marcus Webb had been alive. Officer Marcus Webb, badge number 2,847, Riverside Police Department, hired August 2012 at age 23. Graduated from the police academy, ranked 14th in a class of 32. Adequate scores. No standout achievements. No red flags either, at least not yet. His first complaint came 4 months into his probationary period. December 2012. A traffic stop on the east side. The driver, a black man named Trevor Johnson, alleged that Webb had pulled him over without probable cause, demanded ID without articulable suspicion, and threatened arrest when Johnson asked why he'd been stopped. Internal Affairs reviewed the dashcam footage, ruled the stop within policy parameters. Complaint dismissed. Webb received verbal counseling about communication tactics. That was the pattern for 11 years. 47 complaints total. 46 dismissed or ruled within policy. Only one sustained complaint in 2018, when Webb accidentally discharged his weapon during a training exercise. 5-day suspension without pay. Otherwise, clean record, officially. But look closer at those 47 complaints, and you see something Internal Affairs apparently didn't want to acknowledge. 43 of the 47 complaints came from people of color. 31 involved accusations of racial profiling. 19 included allegations of aggressive or intimidating language. 12 cited failure to properly identify himself or explain the basis for the stop. In 2015, Webb stopped a black city councilman at 9:30 p.m. for suspicious activity. In 2017, Webb detained a Latina attorney for 20 minutes because he didn't believe she was a lawyer, despite her bar association ID. In 2019, he arrested a black teenager for trespassing at a public park. In 2021, he pulled over a black doctor 3 times in 5 months, each time in the doctor's own neighborhood, each time citing erratic driving that the dashcam didn't support. 47 complaints in 11 years. That's not bad luck. That's a pattern. The department's response? Reassignment. In 2016, they moved him from the east side to the north side. In 2019, they moved him again, this time to a primarily administrative role. In 2021, after 3 complaints in 4 months, they put him back on patrol in Westmont, the quiet, affluent neighborhood where serious crime was nearly non-existent, and the worst call you'd get was a noise complaint or a suspicious vehicle report. Low-risk assignment. Minimal supervision. The departmental equivalent of hiding him where he couldn't cause problems. By November 2023, Marcus Webb was 34 years old. He'd received 7 commendations, mostly for routine performance. He'd never made detective. He'd never received an exemplary service award. He'd never been selected for specialized training. He was, by every meaningful metric, a thoroughly mediocre officer with a documented pattern of racially disparate policing that his department had spent 11 years excusing, minimizing, and shuffling around. On Thanksgiving afternoon, he was working overtime holiday pay, time and a half. His shift started at 2 p.m. At 2:43 p.m., he received a dispatch call. Suspicious person in vehicle. Birchwood and Sterling. Caller reports unknown. Black female sitting in parked car in driveway. The caller? A neighbor 2 houses down who'd seen Judge Foster's Lexus pull in and didn't recognize it. Never mind that Foster had lived there for 9 years. Never mind that the car was in the driveway of the house, not on the street. Never mind that suspicious apparently meant black person I don't immediately recognize. Webb took the call. 4 minutes later, he'd end his career. Officer Webb's cruiser pulled in behind Judge Foster's Lexus at 2:49 p.m., lights activated. The dash cam captured everything. What follows is the 18-minute encounter that would cost him his badge and the city $1.9 million. Judge Foster was already out of her vehicle, briefcase in one hand, bakery box in the other, walking toward her front porch. She stopped when she saw the lights, turned, waited. Webb exited his vehicle, one hand resting on his service weapon. Standard positioning. "Ma'am, can I ask what you're doing here? I live here. This is my home. Can I ask why you've pulled into my driveway? We received a call about a suspicious person. I need to see some identification." Judge Foster set down the bakery box on the hood of her car, reached into her briefcase, pulled out her federal judicial credentials, a leather case containing her photo ID, her judicial commission, and her bar card. "I'm Judge Marion Foster." Webb took the credentials, glanced at them. This is where assumptions become impenetrable. The dashcam shows him looking at the ID for perhaps 3 seconds before handing it back. "Ma'am, I need a driver's license or state-issued ID. Those are federal credentials. My name, my photo, my position. You can verify this with, do you have a driver's license? It's in my car. But I've already shown you official government issued. I need to verify your identity properly. Please retrieve your driver's license." Judge Foster's voice remained level, professional, the tone she used in courtroom proceedings when an attorney was trying her patience but hadn't quite crossed the line yet. "Officer, my credentials clearly identify me. My car is registered to this address. You can run the plates. You can contact. Ma'am, I'm asking you to provide a driver's license." "Are you refusing?" "I'm not refusing. I'm explaining that I've already provided valid identification. I'm asking you to verify it through proper channels before this becomes, step away from the vehicle." "Excuse me?" "Step away from the vehicle. Hands where I can see them." This is the moment, the pivot point. where a routine encounter already unnecessary, already based on racial profiling by a neighbor, transforms into a constitutional violation. Judge Foster didn't step away. She stood exactly where she was, credentials still in her hand. "Officer, I'm complying with your request. I'm showing you my identification. I'm explaining that I'm a federal judge. This is my home, and you have no legal basis." "Ma'am, you're on private property." "This is my private property." The first time she raised her voice. Not shouting, just projecting. The tone judges use when they need to cut through nonsense and establish order. "I need you to calm down and comply with my instructions." "I am calm. I am complying. What I'm not doing is allowing you to continue this unlawful—" "You're under arrest." "For what?" "Trespassing on private property and resisting a lawful order." Webb moved toward her. Judge Foster didn't move back, didn't step away. The dash cam shows her standing absolutely still, credentials in hand, as Webb reached for his handcuffs. "Officer, I'm going to say this very clearly so there's no confusion. I am Judge Marion Foster. I sit on the federal bench for the Eastern District of Virginia. This is my home. You are violating my Fourth Amendment rights. I'm asking you one more time to verify my identity before you make a mistake that will end your career." Webb's response was to grab her wrist. By now, Judge Foster's daughter had come outside. 29-year-old Christina Foster, a pediatric resident at Richmond General. The dashcam audio picks up her voice from the porch. "Mom? What's happening?" "Go back inside, Christina. That's my mother." "Why are you—" "Ma'am, step back inside or I'll arrest you for interference." Webb had Judge Foster's hands behind her back now. The credentials fell to the driveway. The handcuffs clicked into place. Judge Foster's voice, absolutely steady. "Officer Webb. That's your name on your badge. Officer Marcus Webb. Badge 2847. You are arresting a federal judge in her own driveway based on a complaint that I was a suspicious person in my own vehicle. I want you to understand what's happening here. You are making a choice. This encounter is being recorded. My daughter is a witness. My family is inside. You have not verified my identity. You have not confirmed ownership of this property. You have not established probable cause for any crime. You are choosing to arrest me anyway. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Ma'am, you can explain all this to the magistrate." Inside the house, Judge Foster's sister had called 911. The call log shows she was connected at 2:54 p.m., 5 minutes into the encounter. The recording captures her frantic explanation. "A police officer is arresting my sister in her own driveway. She's a federal judge. He won't verify her ID. We need a supervisor here now." The dispatcher confirmed the address. Promised to send a supervisor. Estimated time of arrival, 10 to 15 minutes. On the driveway, Webb was walking Judge Foster toward his cruiser. She was still talking, still controlled, still trying to penetrate the willful blindness of a man who decided what he was seeing before he'd looked. "Officer, I've presided over hundreds of cases involving unlawful arrest. I know the law. You know I know the law, because I've told you I'm a judge. You're choosing not to believe me, and that choice is going to have consequences. For you, for your department, for this city. I want you to hear me say this. I will not forget this. I will not let this go. And I will make absolutely certain that this moment follows you for the rest of your career." "You threatening me, ma'am?" "I'm promising you." Webb placed her in the back of the cruiser at 2:58 p.m., 11 minutes into the encounter. A federal judge, handcuffed, sitting in the back of a patrol car in her own driveway while her Thanksgiving dinner grew cold. Her grandchildren, ages 6 and 8, watched from the window. The 6-year-old would later tell investigators, "I thought they were playing pretend because Grandma looked too calm to be arrested for real." Webb returned to Judge Foster's vehicle, picked up the federal credentials from the pavement. For the first time, the dash cam shows this clearly. He actually looked at them, opened the case, studied the Judicial Commission, the photo, the seal. His body language changed, a slight stiffening. He looked toward the cruiser, looked back at the credentials, looked toward the house, where Christina Foster stood on the porch with her phone raised, recording everything. At 3:02 p.m., Webb got into his cruiser. Didn't start the engine, just sat there. The dash cam captures him, staring at the credentials for 37 seconds. Then he radioed dispatch. This is Unit 2847. Requesting supervisor at my location. Birchwood and Sterling. Copy that, 2847. Supervisor already en route. ETA 7 minutes. 7 minutes. 7 minutes of Marcus Webb sitting in his car, knowing maybe not consciously, not yet, but some part of him had to know that he'd just made a catastrophic mistake. 7 minutes of Judge Marion Foster sitting in the back of that same car, hands cuffed, watching her home through the window. 7 minutes of her family standing on the porch. This is where arrogance becomes consequence. Sergeant Linda Vasquez arrived at 3:09 p.m., 22 years on the force. Watch commander for the North District. She'd supervised Webb on and off for 6 years and had personally authored 3 of the incident reports regarding his complaints. She knew his record. She knew his patterns. She pulled in. Approached Webb's cruiser. The dashcam shows their conversation through the open window. Webb. What have we got? Trespassing arrest. Subject claimed to be a federal judge but couldn't provide proper identification. Claimed to be? Vasquez's tone already had an edge. Showed me some kind of credential case but refused to provide a driver's license when, where's the credential case now? Webb handed it to her. Vasquez opened it, closed it, opened it again. The dash cam catches the exact moment her face changed. Marcus. This is a federal judicial commission. This is Judge Marion Foster. I know her. I've testified in her courtroom. She is a federal judge. She wouldn't provide. Her federal credentials are proper identification. They're better than a driver's license. She provided them, and you arrested her anyway? She was belligerent and, get her out of the car. Now, Sergeant, I followed procedure. Marcus, I'm not asking. Open the door. Webb unlocked the back door. Judge Foster stepped out. Vasquez was already reaching for the handcuff keys. Judge Foster, I'm Sergeant Linda Vasquez. I'm removing these restraints immediately. On behalf of the department, I apologize for this unlawful detention. Your credentials were valid. This stop should have ended the moment you identified yourself. The handcuffs came off. Judge Foster rubbed her wrists, picked up her credentials from where Webb had left them on the hood of the cruiser. Her voice, when she spoke, was the temperature of liquid nitrogen. Sergeant Vasquez, I recognize you from my courtroom. You testified in United States v. Morrison, 2019. You were professional and well-prepared. I appreciate you ending this detention. However, I want to be very clear. I will be filing a formal complaint. I will be pursuing legal action. And I will be requesting a full investigation into Officer Webb's conduct and his complaint history. Vasquez nodded. She looked tired, like she'd been waiting for this moment for years. Ma'am, you have every right to do so. Officer Webb, give me your badge and service weapon. Sergeant, now, the dashcam shows Webb removing his badge, his gun belt, handing them over. His face was pale. Vasquez took them without comment. Return to the station. Administrative leave effective immediately. Do not speak to anyone about this incident. Do not contact Judge Foster or her family. Do not delete anything from your phone, your computer, or your social media. I was following. Do you understand the instructions I just gave you? Yes, ma'am. Go. Webb left. Drove away. His career had 12 days left. Vasquez turned to Judge Foster. Judge, I can give you a case number for your complaint right now if you'd like. I can also make sure you get copies of all relevant footage and reports. The dashcam recorded everything. Your daughter's 911 call is logged. This will be fully documented. I want every frame of that footage, every call log, every report. And Sergeant, I want Officer Webb's complete personnel file, including every complaint filed against him in 11 years. I want to know how many times this department has excused this exact behavior. That file is Public Records Sergeant. I'm a federal judge. I know exactly what I'm entitled to request, and I guarantee you, I'll get it. Vasquez didn't argue. Couldn't argue. She knew the law as well as Judge Foster did. The footage went viral within 48 hours. Judge Foster's daughter posted the cell phone video to social media Friday evening with the caption, "My mother, a federal judge with 22 years on the bench, arrested in her own driveway on Thanksgiving by an officer who refused to verify her credentials." This is America. Views? 4.2 million in 3 days. By Monday morning, the story had been picked up by the Washington Post, the New York Times, NBC News, and CNN. Headlines competed for the most devastating angle. Federal judge handcuffed at home after officer refuses to believe her credentials. Thanksgiving arrest. When a badge meets a bench. Virginia judge detained in own driveway as family watches. Officer with 47 prior complaints arrests federal judge for trespassing at her home. The Riverside Police Department issued a statement November 26th. "We are aware of an incident involving one of our officers and a member of the federal judiciary. The officer has been placed on administrative leave pending a thorough investigation. We take all allegations of misconduct seriously and are committed to transparency and accountability." Too little. Too late. The damage was already catastrophic. Judge Foster filed her lawsuit December 1st, 2023. The complaint was 47 pages long and cited every one of Webb's previous complaints. It alleged violation of her Fourth Amendment rights, false arrest, racial profiling, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and deliberate indifference on the part of the department for failing to discipline or terminate an officer with a documented pattern of civil rights violations. She requested $1.9 million in compensatory and punitive damages. The number wasn't random. It represented $100,000 for the arrest itself, $400,000 for emotional distress, and $1.4 million in punitive damages calculated at $30,000 per complaint the department had failed to properly address over 11 years. The city settled on February 14, 2024. Full amount. No admission of liability. But the settlement agreement included specific policy changes, mandatory bias training, body camera requirements for all stops, automatic supervisor notification for any complaint involving racial profiling, and a civilian oversight board with subpoena power. Officer Marcus Webb was terminated December 10, 2023, 17 days after the arrest. The termination letter was leaked to the press within hours. Key excerpt: Officer Webb's actions on the 23rd of November 2023 constitute egregious violations of department policy, constitutional law, and basic standards of professional conduct. Despite being presented with valid federal judicial credentials, Officer Webb chose to arrest Judge Marion Foster based solely on his refusal to accept her identification. This decision demonstrates a fundamental failure of judgment, a disregard for constitutional protections, and a continuation of behavioral patterns documented across 47 prior complaints. The department can no longer excuse, minimize, or reassign Officer Webb. Webb appealed through the police union. The appeal was denied. He filed for unemployment benefits. Denied. He applied to 3 other police departments in Virginia. All 3 rejected his application. His law enforcement career was over. Judge Foster's career? Uninterrupted. She returned to the bench December 5, 2023, presiding over a complex civil rights case involving no irony lost allegations of discriminatory policing in a neighboring jurisdiction. She recused herself from no cases, requested no leave, showed no outward sign that anything had changed. But something had changed. In a January 2024 speech to the Virginia Bar Association, she broke her silence. Judge Foster spoke for 18 minutes. Her remarks were measured, precise, devastating. "I'm a federal judge. I have credentials that most police officers will never see in their entire career. I have a JD from Harvard. I have 22 years on the bench. I've presided over thousands of cases. I've written hundreds of published opinions. And none of that mattered when Officer Webb looked at me and saw only what he'd decided to see. I stood in my own driveway, showing him my federal commission, explaining my position, offering to verify every detail, and he still chose not to believe me. Still chose to handcuff me. Still chose to place me in the back of his cruiser while my grandchildren watched from the window. I want to be very clear about something. I'm not special. I'm not entitled to different treatment because I'm a judge. But I am entitled to the same constitutional protections as every American. And when an officer ignores valid identification, ignores reasonable explanations, ignores obvious signs that he's made a mistake, and proceeds with an arrest anyway that's not a split-second decision under pressure, that's a choice. Officer Webb made 47 of those choices over 11 years. 43 of them involved people of color. That's not coincidence. That's pattern. And the question we need to ask is, why did it take arresting a federal judge before anyone cared? Because here's what frightens me. I had credentials. I had education. I had institutional authority. I had a daughter who knew to call 911. I had a supervisor who knew my face. I had legal knowledge and financial resources and social capital. And I still ended up handcuffed in my driveway. What happens to people who don't have those things? What happens to the grocery store clerk who gets pulled over in his own neighborhood? The college student who gets stopped walking home? The lawyer whose bar association ID isn't believed? The doctor whose credentials are dismissed? They don't get settlements. They don't get apologies. They get records. They get trauma. They get to explain to their children why the people who are supposed to protect them sometimes see them as threats instead. The city paid me $1.9 million. That's accountability. But it's not justice. Justice would be a system that doesn't require a federal judge to be arrested before it acknowledges a pattern. Justice would be a department that addresses bias before it becomes 47 complaints. Justice would be a culture where an officer's first instinct is to verify, not to doubt. To listen, not to dismiss. I'm grateful for the settlement. I'm grateful for the policy changes, but I'm not satisfied. Because if one officer can accumulate 47 complaints over 11 years and still be on the street, still be carrying a badge, still be making stops, then the system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed. And that design protects the wrong people. The speech received a standing ovation. It was cited in 3 separate federal cases involving police misconduct in the following 6 months. Judge Foster donated the entire $1.9 million settlement to organizations working on police reform and bias training. 47 complaints, 11 years, 43 involving people of color, 31 alleging racial profiling. Only 1 sustained an accidental weapons discharge. Let's do the math on that. Because numbers tell stories that words sometimes can't. If Officer Webb had been disciplined after the 10th complaint, 37 people might have been spared his bias. If he'd been terminated after the 20th, 27 people wouldn't have those experiences. If the department had recognized the pattern, instead of hiding it behind reassignments and dismissals, Judge Marion Foster would have spent Thanksgiving with her family instead of handcuffed in a police cruiser. But here's what the department actually did. They moved him. East side to north side, to admin to Westmont. They shuffled him around like a problem they could geographically solve. They documented his complaints and then ignored the documentation. They saw the pattern and decided it wasn't a pattern. They chose institutional convenience over constitutional obligation. And that choice? That's the real story. Because this isn't about one bad officer. Marcus Webb was a symptom, not the disease. The disease is a system that treats complaints as isolated incidents instead of data points. That values officer retention over community safety. That requires a federal judge to be arrested before it acknowledges what 47 complaints should have proven years ago. Judge Foster was right in her speech. She's not special, but she is unusual. She had the credentials to prove her identity, the education to know her rights, the institutional position to demand accountability, and the resources to fight back. Most people don't have those things. Most people file their complaint, Here it's dismissed. And move on. Because what else can they do? They can't sue for $1.9 million. They can't give speeches to the Virginia Bar Association. They can't force policy changes. They just have to live with the knowledge that the system failed them and will probably fail them again. That's not justice. That's not accountability. That's a lottery where your odds of winning depend on how much power you have to fight back. The real question is, what changes now? The Riverside Police Department has new policies. Great. They have mandatory bias training. Wonderful. They have a civilian oversight board. Necessary. But do they have the will to use those tools? Do they have the courage to fire the next Officer Webb before he gets to complaint number 47? Do they have the integrity to acknowledge bias when it's convenient to ignore it? Because if they don't, if any department doesn't, then we're just waiting for the next viral video. The next federal judge, or city councilman, or attorney, or doctor who gets stopped and realizes that their credentials mean nothing against an officer's assumptions. And eventually, we run out of federal judges. Eventually, we're talking about people who don't have institutional authority, who don't have Harvard degrees, who don't have the luxury of eloquent speeches and policy changes named in their honor. We're talking about everyone else, the vast majority. The people this system is supposed to serve. Judge Marion Foster got her $1.9 million. Marcus Webb lost his career. Those are consequences. But consequences aren't reform. Consequences don't prevent the next incident. They just punish the last one. Real reform looks like this: tracking patterns instead of dismissing complaints, believing credentials the first time instead of the 17th, seeing people as human beings instead of threats. And this is crucial, ending careers after the 10th complaint, not the 47th. Because here's the truth that makes this story so devastating. Officer Webb will never work in law enforcement again. Good. Judge Foster will never forget being handcuffed in her own driveway. Tragic. The city paid $1.9 million and implemented new policies. Necessary. But somewhere in America, right now, there's another officer with 40 complaints. Another department that's reassigning instead of firing. Another person being stopped in their own neighborhood, showing their credentials, explaining their presence, and being arrested anyway. That person might not be a federal judge. They might not have Harvard credentials. They might not have a daughter who knows to call 911 or a supervisor who recognizes their face. They might just be a person trying to go home. And that should be enough. Do you think police departments should be required to terminate officers after a specific number of civil rights complaints, regardless of whether they're sustained? Drop your answer below. Because if we don't fix the system that allowed Marcus Webb to rack up 47 complaints over 11 years, we're not preventing the next arrest. We're just waiting to see who it happens to. And if you believe these stories matter, if you think accountability requires visibility, hit that subscribe button. Because silence protects no one. And these patterns don't break themselves. The Thanksgiving arrest cost Marcus Webb his career and cost Riverside $1.9 million. But the real cost? That's the 47 people who filed complaints that didn't matter. The families who watched those complaints get dismissed. The communities who learned that documentation doesn't equal accountability. Until it does. Until we make it. That's the work. That's the story. And that's where you come in.